Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I am at the lovely Varonis office in North Carolina and joined by my friend and coworker, Killian. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Great to see that you're in the office. Should be fun.
Yeah, so this is my second ever time in North Carolina. The last time was we had a big marketing meeting here last year. Killian, were you there for that? Yeah?
Yeah, I was. Yep,
Yeah.
we were
Okay, yeah.
both there for that.
The whole thing, it was so hot. All I remember really was getting stuck in an elevator and then this bizarre moment where one of my friends just happened to be in North Carolina, but had been camping for 3 days and came in for a tour of the office and then had to take a picture of all of us, but, like,
Yep.
we couldn't find everyone. So my poor, smelly, dirty friend, embarrassed to be in front of a bunch of all these fancy, like, well-dressed, like, marketing people, just had to kinda sit there and make conversation for, like, 10 minutes until we could get everyone together. But it was a great trip, and I remembered how nice this office was, so I
hmm
wanted to stop by and also maybe give a little tour at the end if
Oh.
anybody wants to know what the Varonis office actually looks like. So yeah, I am excited to be here, and I think I'm going to be, yeah, in New York in about 3 days. So I'm gonna be checking out some hacker spaces in the New York area. I'm hoping maybe that I'll be able to check out like Resistor and Hack Manhattan and a couple other cool spots that I've heard about, and maybe do like a live stream there or
Mhm.
some sort of collaboration would be very cool. Oh, we can see also that our stream is only live on Redia and everything else is not working. So I
Hmm.
might actually Yep, yep. I mentioned when we were starting that we were having some technical difficulties. So maybe I should create a new event and do a stream. Oh, Twitch is working. Thanks for shouting out Twitch. Yeah, I mean, hmm, All right, so when this happens, we use Restream, which is usually pretty good about this, but it tends to fracture things and make it so that all the old events won't be live anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so what can I do? We can either end the stream and start on the other one, which security forward and the LinkedIn is kind of a big point of that, or I think we might do that. So let me set something up really quickly, everyone, and give me just a second while perhaps Killian can start on. I'll share my other screen. And Killian, do you remember this story? Did you read this one?
I did, yes.
Do you want to
Um,
talk about that a little bit while I behind the scenes, hopefully, try to
yeah,
get the stream fixed?
yeah. I'll give you a chance to do a little bit of juggling. Yeah. So this was a pretty interesting one. The rundown is basically this guy worked remotely for managing the water treatment plant there. And at one point during his career, um, Allie wants me to do something cool. I can't juggle or anything. Sorry. Um, just being honest, anyway. So the guy at the treatment plant there apparently had at one point set up additional remote working or remote access software on his work computer to access it from his home computer, as opposed to whatever standard process that they're supposed to go through for remote monitoring. At one point, he ended up, resigning from that position, still maintained that access to the systems from his personal account, and came back in later on and was actively trying to make changes to the system, to basically cause harm, to change the calibrations, the configurations, um, which is which is fairly terrifying. I mean, we talked about previous critical infrastructure issues in the past. Even some ransomware gangs who have, I don't know, say accidentally, but have blundered into attacking U.S. critical infrastructure in some ways, and they realize that it's way too hot. And this is something that they will come down hard on. So it's this is kind of the real world scenario, the most tangible real world scenario for one of these cyber attacks is like this could physically lead to harm to many people, in this case with the water treatment plant, if something were to go wrong. um, so it's
Definitely.
again really serious. I
All right,
agree
I
with
think
James. Yeah, messing with water is one of the most despicable crimes.
yeah,
Sure.
definitely. I mean,
Yes.
it could lead to some of the worst consequences. I see,
Mhm.
let's see, on security forward. Wait, on security. I actually see us on security forward. I think am I wrong? Can somebody on security forward tell me? I'm not sure about LinkedIn, but it seems like everything else is kind of catching up. In the
Oh,
chat, if you
okay.
want to let me know if we are live or not, that would be very cool of you. Um, but yeah, so as Killian was saying, in this
Yeah.
case, oh yeah, we are live on LinkedIn. Okay,
Oh,
sorry
right.
everyone. It looks like we just got a late start. But yeah, okay, all right. You could stop bucking and jiving, Killian. But then again, what you were saying was absolutely right.
Yeah.
Whenever you have something like water treatment, like that's a ransom
Hmm.
that's probably either going to get paid or prioritized, just because you can't
Hmm.
have people who are like
Hmm.
potentially at risk from that sort of thing. So any sort of attack from an insider or an outside group is going to cause panic, because the most common thing is like a ransomware thing where everything gets shut down or something malicious happens, and they demand money to
Hmm.
fix it. So these organizations are going to be super hair trigger about that sort of thing when it
Hmm.
comes to water, and especially with that many people relying on this water treatment facility.
Yeah.
Obviously it goes without saying that messing with computer systems or installing a backdoor, like, sure, that could be used for one person's revenge, but what if
Mhm.
they downloaded a bad Plex server, as we've
Right.
seen happen before,
Yeah.
and their system was infected too, and suddenly they have backdoor access to a super critical infrastructure system. So yeah, this is just an example of, I guess, insider threat when you
Yep.
have someone with IT, like administration privileges, to just set themselves up as a remote administrator.
Hmm.
You can either extort or potentially get revenge on an organization that you feel like has wronged you, at the expense of potentially thousands of people who rely
Hmm.
on that water treatment facility. Um, but okay, I'm so glad the stream is working. You guys made me so nervous, but I think it was my mistake for not selecting the right output or something. Or honestly, this office is a little bit locked down. So if it just like was denying access to some services, then I would not be completely surprised. All right. All right, so next up, we have Apple fixing a couple more
Hmm.
zero-day vulnerabilities which were exploited in the wild. And when we see these, what is your gut response when you see an emergency Apple update?
Slam that update button as soon as possible.
Yes, a lot of these are nasty because
Yeah,
they
they are.
definitely are tied to things like these mercenary spyware groups that make
Hmm.
it basically impossible to do anything about being targeted. The whole point of these services is that they're super expensive, but they hoard these vulnerabilities and pay, black hats
Hmm.
a good amount of money to turn them in instead of turning them into Apple. So it's always this cat and mouse game between Apple, who's trying to fix things as quickly as possible, and then these organizations that have enough money to pay a really good bounty for critical bugs that affect a couple of things that we typically see over and over, which are like the WebKit is a
Yeah,
huge
it's a big one.
impacted target, where once somebody manages to pop the WebKit browser,
Hmm.
sending a malicious link is all you need to do to infect someone. And that's kind of, I guess, the difference between like one click and zero click exploits is this
Yeah.
is like a one click exploit. And these tend to be more accessible to threat
Yep.
actors because they're cheaper and they require a bit more interaction from the target. Whereas zero-day exploits or zero-click exploits are like, you get sent a message and it installs something in the
Yeah.
background and there's nothing you can do. So it does seem to be the second tier of this, but that's actually, in my
Mm.
opinion, worse, because it means that more people probably had access to this kind of
Yeah.
ability to attack someone by sending them a specifically crafted and malicious link.
I believe too, Apple. Oh, there it is. That there actually wasn't say. I feel like I've seen a number of them this year that they've had to patch. I don't know if it's more or less than previous years, but it seems like a lot this year. But they are doing. It seems like a pretty good job of getting the patches out there. It's always funny too. I'm obsessive about checking for updates on everything, and it sort of personally annoys me, like when I don't see an update when I expect to see one. And I was like look on the forums to see like, oh, is it running late or something? And people was like, oh, what's the big deal? Why do you got to worry about your update? And it's like, it's like clearly you're not, in the industry. I don't care about whatever features are in there. I just prefer to not have to face this down, right?
Yeah, and I think also there's so many people who are directly or indirectly in a critical industry
Hmm.
where if they were hit by something like this, like the treasure trove that would open up to the attackers would be pretty substantial depending on how they make their money. So like typically like these are the kinds of things we see governments using right
Hmm.
now, but cybercrime organizations and anybody who's interested in popping, somebody connected
Right.
to a valuable company or a government agency, like that's the kind of thing where these are becoming more and more accessible and easy for people to purchase and use before they get fixed.
Oh, there it is. James said the book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, goes over the bidding war for exploits. I've never read that book to date, but I've had a number of people recommend it. I guess I got to get on this train now. I can't let that one sleep.
Yeah, this has always been an evolving industry, and on the plus side, it does put pressure on companies like Apple
Hmm.
who make these critical products to finally pay a fair or even generous bug bounty, and really dedicate resources to security, because of the shift in how much black hats get paid,
Hmm.
by threat actors to develop this stuff and then create like a mercenary spyware company. Um, as a reaction, Apple and Google have had to dramatically up the
Hmm.
way that they both pay researchers out that turn things in responsibly, and also the way that they open up their products to transparency. Like it just doesn't, when you have this much skin in the game and this
Right.
many customers who are like critical people, then it really just doesn't make sense to have everything difficult for security research to contribute the right way. And that used to be the biggest complaint I heard, was people turning in big vulnerabilities and
Hmm.
getting paid basically nothing from
Yeah.
Apple and Google. All right, so next up we have USB drive like attacks. Like what is that doing in 2023? So the tactic of infecting USB drives is very famous. It's not only been featured in
Hmm.
media, like Mr. Robot, but also it was a predominant way that Stuxnet got initially deployed to
Hmm.
its ultimate target of those centrifuges it destroyed. So it's interesting to see that we're right back where we started when it comes to USB drives being one of the most common ways for people
Hmm.
to store and move data between computers. And as a result of their convenient status, we continue to see these drives that are infected be a way that a lot of people can get infected even in 2023. So there's a couple of different threat actors that are kind of working this angle, and one of them is Shogu, attributed to a Chinese espionage group also known as temp.hex, and then another called Snowy Drive, which I think is pretty appropriate since they're making it rain malicious programs from drives. They have a little bit less of a cool name, UNC
Hmm.
for, yeah, but they primarily target oil and gas firms in Asia. But these are the kinds of attacks you can see going after basically anybody with
Yeah.
interesting intellectual property. We see logistics, health, communications. Looks like it could be both industrial espionage and then also just regular old
Sure.
espionage. So these sorts of campaigns are interesting, also because of how much I guess these threat actors have learned from Stuxnet and other
Hmm.
USB deployed pieces of malware. They have really done some sophisticated stuff here, and the article goes into detail of how these sorts of attacks work. The This is some pretty standard stuff with Windows, like DLL, order
Right.
hijacking, and then also infecting all other drives that are plugged in, which is a nice and very classic touch that helps hide this, so that if anything else that has mass media ability is plugged into
Hmm.
the computer at that time, it gets a copy of the malicious program,
Yeah.
which will continue to propagate itself, hopefully, across whatever environment that it's placed in, at least according to the attackers. So this is again like relatively interesting in that it is persistent. It works
Hmm.
across a good amount of platforms, and it's a pretty system against these specific targets. So it does go into a little bit more of how the entire process works. It's pretty Windows specific, at least in this
Yeah.
example. But it installs malware that is persistent. It's able to do all sorts of things like screenshotting,
Hmm.
uploading files, exfiltrating. It's basically everything you would need for an espionage, like a stealthy espionage attack,
Hmm.
or to up things to like a locker attack or a ransomware attack if you really wanted
Right.
to. So the fact that these people are establishing persistence and then kind of laying low and stealing data means that they're probably more interested in these entities continuing to operate and generate interesting information than they are in profit from just immediately shutting them down and getting what they can.
Right.
So again, an interesting assessment that this is probably like an intelligence group that's like trying to get access to interesting industrial data or other things that they want to continue operating. And it does not seem to be, at least right now, a disruptive attack, although it very easily could escalate to one given all of the abilities that it has here, like writing files or deleting files. That seems like pretty much exactly what a ransomware thing would need to do in order, or a wiper would need to do in order to impact these organizations just from a shutting them down standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that this is still a thing, as you mentioned, 2023. I remember much earlier in my career working with organizations that face this near constantly. Like someone would plug something in, and then the first thing it would do is establish persistency on that machine, and then it would also copy some stuff to anything that was like a map drive. So if you connected to the map drive, it would have some hidden files, or it would try and affect your computer, and it sort of just went around and around and around. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, and I'm not really nostalgic for those old days, but a little security nostalgia here with the attacks. Some classics coming back.
So, so here is an interesting question. Is using tasks and schedulers a valid method to establish a minor rubber ducky USB from a normal USB?
Hmm.
I don't think so. Like at least in this case, like
Right.
they're actually like putting things into schedules and stuff in order to like make the malware persistent, which is
Right.
cool. I mean, from a technical perspective, it's cool to see like the mechanism they're using to do that. But you could basically make it do something over and over. So if you wanted
Hmm.
to have it pop open a shell and do a certain thing, like that's kind of what this specific implementation is doing, rather than trying to be like a USB rubber ducky. Which so let me define the difference between those two things. This is a regular USB drive that is getting infected in a way that when it's plugged in, it spread the infection to the computer and other devices. It's the software
Hmm.
that is recognized by like Windows, and it tries to process it properly, but instead it does something bad, and then it ends up like allowing an infection. So it's pretty sophisticated. Like
Hmm.
it has software on it. That's the really interesting part.
Right.
The USB drive is unremarkable, whereas like a USB rubber ducky is the drive itself is acting like a keyboard and typing out malicious commands. So
Right.
it is recognized as a different type of device, and because of that, it's given a more trusted level of access. This malicious USB drive is starting from the bottom. It doesn't have keyboard
Mm.
access. It can't type stuff in. It really has to evade and make sure that it doesn't get caught while doing all these sneaky things. So I would say that these USB drive attacks are much more sophisticated than like a USB rubber ducky, just because they rely on very sneaky and evasive malware. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So this is targeting people like you and me, Killian,
Hmm.
but also what I guess most hackers would consider to be script kiddies, like people that are
Yeah.
looking for an easy way to jump on a train of something that gives them power. So a lot of the time we'll see these fake exploits drop where like
Hmm.
the target is actually researchers, and it's
Yep.
people who are looking to try out a proof of concept. They could be like anybody from a red teamer looking to try a new
Yep.
tool to a blue teamer to trying to make sure that their infrastructure isn't vulnerable to this proof of concept. POCs, proof of concepts, are very valuable to us because it means we
Yeah.
can test out like an emerging vulnerability, and we can make sure that our own infrastructure is safe from it. So whenever people start spreading fake proof of concepts, it is very easy to have hackers get
Hmm.
tricked by it. So, like I said, this affects anybody who is interested in
Hmm.
testing systems to see if they're vulnerable or not. So these were GitHub repositories that were actually hosting an old proof of concept, or like a proof of concept against like an old vulnerability that is unrelated to this one.
Right.
And it had garnered a good enough amount of interest because it is a high severity, use after free flaw impacting the Linux kernel, which is obviously if you have an older version of Linux, then this is
Hmm.
something that is going to impact it. But yes, it was an old legitimate copy for another kernel vulnerability, and it did just go ahead and infect you when you ran it. So this is going to create a kworker file, adds it to the bash RC for persistence. So then you have a process that is going to start itself over and over.
Hmm.
And then the contacts the attacker's server and downloads and executes a Linux bash script from an external URL. So very kind of rudimentary,
Yeah.
but this is behavior that it's kind of live off the land behavior
Yep.
where rudimentary is actually good because you can guarantee that the tools that you need for your malicious script to run are going to be present on the person's computer. So by keeping it super simple and living off the land on this one, yeah, this seems like it's actually a pretty effective attack, and it goes
Hmm.
ahead and schedules itself. So if I would say like a casual Linux user who tries this out, nothing happens, it doesn't work. They're like, cool, my thing isn't vulnerable, or oh,
Yeah.
the thing that I'm testing isn't vulnerable, too bad, and then forgets about it. Like they would actually have a task scheduled to every time
Right.
they restart their computer, begin the infection all over again, um, from some pretty simple tools. So
Yeah. It's
don't
it's
trust the exploit
interesting.
code.
Right, yeah, right. It's interesting though with these two stories back to back. This is just the Linux version of almost the exact same thing we talked about. I mean, the infection vector is different, but uses the scheduler to maintain persistence, lives off the land, in Windows, running PowerShell scripts as opposed to Bash in Linux. So it's interesting that the just to look at the compare and contrast. One system is not, I'm not going to say more vulnerable than the other ones, but it's easy to replicate the same techniques across multiple types of systems if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and this in I mean, we see attacks against security researchers all the time, and this is a really common one. Another that we will see is like a social engineering attack
Hmm.
by like North Korean actors, where like they will um, say that they're working on a really interesting or spicy proof of concept and invite you to collaborate, but then
Hmm.
they'll just use like malicious npm like repositories to infect your computer, so that when you compile or build or attempt to run this thing
Right.
that you're helping on, it ends up just infecting you. But yeah, this is not new. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, Lazarus. They're the
Yep.
notorious ones that have been involved in targeting security researchers, because security researchers are great. They have elevated levels of access.
Hmm.
They tend to work with tools that might be valuable if you don't have access to them already. So being able to steal their tools, steal their exploits, and rifle through their research definitely seems like an easy way of getting a jump on finding vulnerabilities that maybe not everybody has access to yet.
Right.
All right, next up, we have Google Play forcing business checks to make sure that they end up in our news segment less. So we talk about malicious Google Play apps pretty constantly.
Hmm.
These will often siphon up lots of explicitly say they're going to, or maybe they'll do things like install secondary programs that have malicious
Hmm.
attributes later on. Google has traditionally not done a great job of this. They've kind of lagged it on being able to identify and take these down quickly. So
Right.
seeing that they are now stepping up in terms of requiring a little bit more information is part of them winning the whack-a-mole game of actually banning developers that do
Hmm.
this. So typically when they ban a developer, they can just pop up under a different name, and there's very little
Right.
verification done to make sure that it's not the exact same person that just got caught doing something bad. So being able to catch them quickly, or at least make it a little bit harder for them to pop up again under a new name. Honestly, this is probably going to upset some people. Like,
Yeah.
I have run multiple businesses before, and I don't think that they have a DUNS number because I think you have to pay for it. So creating like an additional, potentially an additional
Yeah.
burden on businesses that want to participate in this just makes it harder for legitimate developers to, like actually join and like contribute. But I would say, like, based on the amount of times that malicious developers have snuck through and managed to
Hmm.
get very, very popular apps up and in front of people, infecting lots of computers, it does seem to me that perhaps there is a problem here.
Yeah. I mean, people complain about Apple's like walled garden and being very restrictive, but there's some benefit to that. There has to be a balance in there. What is James says $25? You're a developer. Maybe that's to get a DUNS number. I'm not sure. And then I think Apple requires $100, something like that. Maybe that's per year for the developer fee. Not
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Yeah, okay, that's not too much. It still is a burden. If you just want to be able
Mm.
to develop and publish an app, like it is a burden. Like if
Hmm.
especially if it's a free app or something like that, like having to pay to publish it on their platform is kind of a bummer, like
Hmm.
and not everybody is gonna like that. But I would also say like Dun and Bradstreet is like a private company. So like I don't know, man. Like having like a private company step in as like the regulating agency for like people trying to submit like applications to the Google Play Store is a little weird, because it does kind of create no, it effectively creates a monopoly on the requirement for like getting into this business is working with this other private business.
Right.
So I mean, it's a little weird. I find it strange. Like I again, I as a business that has worked for a while, and I don't have a DUNS number. So like I feel like a
Hmm.
lot of other businesses would be a little annoyed by this extra step that they have to take. But yeah, for $125, I guess that's not too bad. But for some of the smaller developers or people that like just submit this like as a passion project, like creating the
Right.
extra burden is gonna annoy them. Just, I mean, I kind of wonder if it's the same argument as when we were talking about developers for like NPM like refusing to do 2FA because like they
Yeah.
kept getting breached over and over and over, and finally they were just like, listen, like if you want to submit here you have to have 2FA enabled.
Yep.
This I mean, 2FA doesn't cost 120 $25, but
Right.
at this point, like assuming that they're making some sort of income off of it, maybe is a little bit of a breach here. I feel like there's a lot of people who don't probably make any money on the apps that they have on the Play Store. So is this for paid apps? Is this for free
Mm,
apps? Like, do you now have to pay to put a free app on like Google? Like, kind of annoying. But we'll see. I do think that something needs to be done about this. However, I'm not sure if adding pro like private
mm.
regulatory burden costs money is necessarily the best option. Like maybe just like develop your own verification process, Google, or like something like that would be my response. But I am encouraged to see at least some sort of improvement in this field.
Yeah, something better than nothing, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about our most unfortunate segment. Who is getting free credit monitoring? So this time, it's Colorado State University has announced
Mm,
of a breach of data impacting students. Now we had, and of course, Clop ransomware,
Klopp,
Move It,
mhm.
data transfer. We're going to be continuing to hear about this for a while. Like I said in some of our previous streams, that ransomware gang like hasn't even had time to go through all the
Yeah.
data they stole. Like they're backlogged in terms of like exploiting people that they stole data from in that breach. It was just kind of a grab that hit lots of organizations at once, and there's
Mhm.
still people just waiting to be contacted by the attackers. So we've heard a bit about schools being impacted by this, and there was an especially nasty case a couple weeks ago where I think it was like Minneapolis, like
Yeah,
public school
I think
district,
so.
had a huge breach involving lots and lots of very, very sensitive data. This was like counseling notes, mental
Mhm.
health records, like all the very, very, very private stuff. So the good news on this breach seems that the majority of the stuff is kind of run of the mill data breach, like
Mhm.
like application stuff. So it doesn't seem like, at least initially, they're talking about the same kind of like very sensitive like internal data that was the subject of the Minnesota data breach. But
Mhm.
I guess consolation prize is like it's not as personal or like medical
Mhm.
or some of the other things that were really horrific about that last breach. But it does seem to be the kind of standard employee identification number, social security numbers,
Yeah.
demographic information, date of birth, like the kind of stuff that would facilitate phishing or financial crime. So
Mhm.
I don't see where the free credit monitoring is mentioned here, but I would bet my life on the fact that
Yeah.
someone in this university is getting offered free credit monitoring soon. So very unfortunate
Yeah.
to see this, but again, we expect to see a continuation of these companies coming out and saying that they are victims of these groups, just because of the sheer amount of data that was exfiltrated from this particular Move It data transfer attack.
Here's something that's interesting too, for because we've been talking about this for what, a month or two now, and it's been in the news for a long time. It's interesting because I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago, and I know well after you and I have been talking about this, and I noticed that they had mentioned that they were using the Move It tool, and I when I heard this, I'm like, probably you need to talk to your IT team, make sure it's patched, like report this up through the chain of command because like this could be a big deal. Um, and so fast forward several weeks later, I was talking to that person again, and they're like, "Oh, a couple weeks after this initial conversation that I mentioned, the organization with Move It finally was like, yeah, you should probably like stop using it and delete everything on it and like not share information." I'm like, at this point, the cat's out of the bag because you've been using it for several weeks after like you were sort of warned to make sure you're patched and everything else. So I guess my point being is that for the amount of press that this is getting, um, I'm surprised that not a lot of people, or there's still a lot of organizations that haven't heard about it. And exactly right, there are two recent patches that have been announced from it. The initial one from a month or two ago, and then one last week or 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I just thought it was odd and sort of scary um, that there still seems to be a lack of industry knowledge about this. So potentially more data that maybe didn't even go out the door yet could still be going out the door.
Okay, so I also very quickly looked up the Duns number
Mhm.
conundrum as I was making wild accusations about the price. It is free, however, it's only free if you've got time to wait. So you can pay like 200 some
Mhm.
dollars to expedite it, which seems like some people maybe would need to, like if
Yeah.
like it takes a good amount of time to do it, or if there's suddenly a flood of people who are
Right.
applying, because suddenly it's now a requirement for a specific sector.
Mm.
So yeah, like I guess my new concern would be like we've seen, I think it was like in Israel, there was a bunch of government services where
Hmm.
somebody figured out they could automate scheduling appointments or like, putting in requests, and then they ended up turning around and selling those appointments to people who
Yeah.
needed things urgently. So I don't know, just creating a bottleneck. We'll see how it goes.
Mm.
Maybe Duns and Bradstreet is like an absolute Bradstreet, sorry, is an absolute machine when it comes to getting through verifications, and we won't see any impact on that. But still, it is free, it turns out,
Hmm.
but only if you have time to wait.
Yeah. I'll address this. Z says it's hard to miss the movie story. Everyone talks about it. Everybody in our world talks about it, but clearly not in the business world. Not all the time.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's always like a new noteworthy business coming out and saying, "Hey,
Mhm.
we got breached by this," and like we're in the process of figuring out what's happening. So it seems like it's been in the news for just months now, continuously,
Mhm.
and I think it'll continue to be in the news for months to
Yeah.
go as the negotiations drag on. All right, so next up, so we talked about the takedown of breach forums,
Hmm.
or just breached over the last several months, and now we have well, almost the conclusion. So we
Yeah.
have Palm pleading guilty to a number of different charges, including some surprising ones, but
Wow.
possibly related to the way that the service was used to distribute illicit goods.
Hmm.
So if you own a service and people are passing, lots of
Hmm.
different illicit things through it, you can expect to be charged with everything as the
Right.
facilitator of that crime. So, possessing the server of this organization makes you liable for everything passing through it. So while it isn't really mentioned too much through the charging document exactly where some of these things were found, you can kind of assume
Hmm.
that by owning and operating a server in which lots of people are exchanging illicit and sketchy data,
Right.
some of that data is going to be particularly egregious. And if you just don't care, well, you might end up caring when it comes to being responsible for what was on those servers
Hmm.
when they get seized. So some of these charges are extremely serious, and they carry, I think, it was 40 years. Yep, 40
I
years
believe yes.
imprisonment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is looking pretty grim for Palm in terms of the amount of time that he'll be serving for this. It's also interesting to note that the second administrator of breach forums, Bakhmet, I think, Bakhmut, something like that. No, not that. He shut this down, or she shut this down immediately after Palm was arrested,
Hmm.
because they were concerned that the federal government had access to it. And they were
Right.
completely right. It was demonstrated in the charging documents that yes, the federal government did have access to all the servers. And I don't know if that second admin is going to get a knock on their door at some point, but at least for
Hmm.
the other people who were involved in this scheme, it seems like the actions of that one person shut down what had become a pretty transparent window into this
Hmm.
trade. So pretty wild story. Yeah, and it seems like it rapidly drawing to a conclusion. We'll have to see what the actual sentence is going to be, probably in a couple of weeks. But this
Hmm.
happened relatively fast. I think it was only like 2 months ago we were talking about
Yeah.
this storm going down and some arrests being made. So this was wrapped up relatively quickly.
Hmm.
All right, next up, um, this is truly a unique and special idea.
This was
So let's say
bold.
uh, I can't I can't believe this one. All right, so let me try to sum this one up from what I remember. Let's say that you're an IT employee who's disgruntled and you want to make some extra money. Maybe you like fast cars. Maybe you have a debt in Las Vegas. You lost everything. I don't know. Like, but either way, it is now desperate, and you have to find a way to make money. You're looking for opportunities, and then all of a sudden, your employer gets ransomwared, and you
Right.
have IT administrator access to the emails where the ransomware gang is sending their demands. So, ransomware gang comes in, kicks in the door, encrypts everything, and then tells the business that you work for that they need to pay a certain amount of money
Hmm.
or they're never going to get anything back. So this person's idea was to go into the email and change the Bitcoin wallet address that the ransom
Hmm.
was supposed to be paid to his own Bitcoin wallet address. So he was basically like attempting to cheat both the ransomware gang and the business he worked for
Right.
simultaneously. So, that didn't work. It
No.
might have worked actually though, and that's why it was such a bold move, because
Hmm.
had the employer decided like, "Okay, we have to pay this ransom," they would have paid this guy, they never would have gotten any
Hmm.
response, and they would have been like, "Ooh, those ransomware rascals,
Right.
they never gave us back the key." And, the
Right.
ransomware gang would have gotten, maybe a reputational hit, which I'm sure they could probably survive. So what what of course actually happened was the company decided not to pay, and as a
Hmm.
result the FBI came in and started doing an investigation, and they immediately determined that one employee had had like
Yep.
multiple sustained access to like high level email accounts with no verifiable reason. And through the course of the investigation, that employee attempted to delete the incriminating data from
Hmm.
their device, but ended up still having it being recovered
Yeah.
by the cybercrime team anyway. So, did I miss any details, Killian?
No, that was it. And I mean, this was again, this I've seen this exact thing play out in a couple movies so far. Like the mob's after you, and you got to cheat both of them. But it was, I mean, the guy shot his shot. Um, I mean, that's what I'll
He
say.
certainly did. He
But
certainly did.
but we talk about this. I mean, even here at Veronis, we talk about this, like monitoring. The email, how much people, some people at least, consider an email server basically like a file server, and we have to treat it as such because the amount of sensitive data that goes through there. um, we don't think about it. You pop it in an email, you go out and you send it out. um, so you have to monitor for that. You have to monitor for inappropriate IT admin access, and monitor the behavior to make sure it's not weird, because it's, again, a huge target that I think maybe is not the first thing that a lot of people think about. But this is something that we've been talking about and I've been talking about for years now. So it's interesting to see almost like a fantasy scenario that we could make up for a demo or something play out in real life like this. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, so, looks like he received 3 years and 7 months in prison for blackmail and unauthorized access to a computer with intent to commit other offenses. This seems like, it was a 5-year process of getting this, like, prosecuted after he
Mhm.
was initially caught, and it just altogether, like, a pretty crazy scheme, just, like,
Yeah.
getting like, trying to steal the money from the cyber criminals and not get caught. Of course, like, having multiple unauthorized access to sensitive files from your home computer, and your home
Hmm.
network, was definitely something that got him flagged.
Hmm.
So having good internal control seems like it was a factor
Yep.
in this being able to be caught. Just because otherwise, I really don't know if there was no like logging, or if there was no way of,
Right.
or if he was like using a VPN to log into the company network. If all these were coming from like internal, or if they weren't flagged for being suspicious, then yeah, it definitely would have been possible that this could have actually
Hmm.
worked. I have to say, like, it's not altogether implausible that this scheme could have worked.
Yeah, there's a
And
scenario. Hmm.
yeah, and provided that it wasn't investigated thoroughly, like it's possible he might have even gotten away with it, because ransomware gangs don't exactly have the most stellar reputation when it comes
Right.
to like doing what they say they're going to do. All right, still very wild to me. All right, so Killian, do you remember what scareware is? Because I think that this is a very funny term for software, and it took me a minute to remember exactly what it's talking about.
I read this a while ago, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically like fake ransomware where it pops up and sort of acts like it is but doesn't do anything. Is that more or less what it is?
Yeah, so if you've
Okay.
ever been on a person's computer and like the second you open a web browser, it's just like warning, warning, you have
Yeah.
been infected. You've got 10
Hmm.
viruses. The CIA has hacked it, whatever. Those sorts of big fake banner
Right.
pop-ups like are literally just nuisance programs.
Hmm.
Like some of them like have evolved from adware where like
Yeah.
basically it'll pop up unwanted ads, and like somebody gets a Cadillac. I don't know. Like
Hmm.
but this sort of attack is directed towards fake customer service centers. So you'll typically,
Hmm.
like you'll really see this directed a lot of at like elderly people,
Yep.
where
Mhm.
They will target and infect these computers with very low level adware that just like pop
Yep.
up like annoying things. And it could be something as simple as like a browser extension or something malicious that's put there. But either way, it allows them to create the feeling that something is very wrong.
Yep.
And by maximizing the threats and making it seem like that person's going to go to jail or pay a fine or something terrible is going to happen, it makes it so that if, people call into these call centers, they
Mhm.
end up giving over real money to get rid of it, and then they pat themselves on the back. So it's basically
Yeah. Yeah.
racketeering. They create the problem and then they sell the solution.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like what was interesting about this was it was in Ukraine, and this was a 10-year hunt
Mhm.
by Interpol to track down the people who were making these like scam like call centers.
Right.
Apparently, it hit more than 300,000 people. Confirmed losses of 700,000 euros, which barely seems worth it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that's pretty much it for that one. So it's just kind of interesting to see like who is responsible for these
Right.
these things that primarily prey on like people who are not very tech savvy and think
Mhm.
that's very wrong and that they're running an unlicensed version of a program or like they've been
Right.
hacked or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have. I've cleaned a fair enough amount of these things off of friends and relatives' computers over the years.
All right, so I've got a related story too.
Mhm.
So the FBI is reporting that tech support scams are now using shipping companies to collect cash. So let's say that they managed to get an elderly person with the scam
Right.
they were just talking about, and now the problem is like how does that person get paid? Like if
Mhm.
if they set up a credit card like receiving company, they're going to get flagged and taken down the
Right.
second they get caught. They can really do these scams for longer if they are inventive about the way that people
Mhm.
pay them. So right now, if you work at Western Union or the gift card section of a Walmart,
Yep.
you already know the type. Like so, like a confused and upset like elderly
Mhm.
person comes up and asks for like $400 in gift cards. Like you're
Mhm.
gonna ask them why, and you might want to have a little sit down with them. And like at this point, like it's so common to have these
Yeah.
Western Union or gift card scams that they've basically switched tactics. So Killian, this tactic is ridiculous. They want you to take cash, put it in a magazine, and mail it to them.
That is, wasn't that like the very first? Correct me if on my history, but I'm pretty sure that was like the way that the very first like ransom like worked, where I forget the name of it, but this was like back in like the floppy days or something, where like you put in the floppy and it affected you, and they wanted you to mail like a check or something to a PO box somewhere. I forget the name of it, but that was like the very first like virus ransomware scenario. Like I want to say this was like in the 90s or could have been the late 80s. So we're going back to that.
Yeah, I was amazed. So yeah, like not only are these scams kind of escalating, but you can see the kind of creativity these people are
Mm-hmm.
having to do now in order to get around how profitable and how
Mm-hmm.
widespread these scams are. Like I said, I hear stories from people who either work at Walmart's or who work at Western Unions talking about like how often they have to like counsel people that are victims of these scams. So at this point, I feel like those points have become like
Mm-hmm.
the biggest most likely way for like one of these scareware people
Yeah.
to lose their bounty, is if somebody at the Western Union is just like, no, sweetie, like you don't want to send a gift card to, this random country. Like it's not real. Like here's a number to call.
Right.
So now that they're trying to cut those like more common points. It's kind of funny because like if they could use Bitcoin, they would. But these people that they're attacking obviously like would not be the prime candidate to send anybody Bitcoin. So instead, like if you
Right.
can't take credit cards, the next best thing is like figuring out how to mail basically cash, which
Mm-hmm.
you would think that you would know better than stuffing a bunch of like $100 bills into like an old magazine and mailing it to someone to like you get this like pop up to stop coming up on your computer. But unfortunately, it seems like this is actually something that's working to the point that the
Mm-hmm.
FBI has had to come out and do an announcement about it.
Yes. Here's what it is: the AIDS Trojan, one of the first attacks ever documented. It was released via floppy disk in 1989, and the victims needed to send $189 to a PO box in Panama to restore access to their system.
I love it. I love, man. That's a long time that this has been happening. It's
Yeah.
and it kind of relates back to the USB, the USB
Right.
drive
Right.
story too. Some of these old tactics are still just just evolving and like kind of like coming back in different ways. So yeah, it
Hmm.
is interesting to see how the old tactics are still working. Although I have to say that yeah, the magazine one is at least for me a new one. All right, I'm going to skip through a couple just because
Yeah.
we're running a little tight on time. This is one that I'm actually pretty excited about. The US is preparing the Cyber Trust Mark for more secure devices, and that means like a
Yes.
rating system that's more accredited for talking about whether or not a
Hmm.
device has met certain regulatory burdens for cybersecurity. So this has never been a focus
Hmm.
before, but now you would have another metric to judge products you're considering buying by. Where
Hmm.
if you have a home that you want secure, you could, pay maybe a little bit extra or like find brands that have higher cybersecurity marks than like the
Hmm.
cheapest available one, which might actually end up costing you more in
Right.
the future by getting hacked or becoming part of a botnet.
Right. Yeah, no, this one's really cool because I mean, I know we've had to have talked about stories like the cheap whatever camera. It doesn't, it doesn't require a password. It's exposed to the internet. Everybody can log into it, or yeah, it just becomes a botnet because it's running some out of the box board. Um,
Yeah, that's really cool.
mhm.
I'm excited to see that. It looks like certified devices would be listed into a national that consumers would consult via QR code to compare the
Mhm.
security information in multiple products. So this would
That's
look like
nice.
this little, where is it? Where's this little shield right here? Where is it? I thought they had a picture of it. Maybe I just imagined it. Wow. Oops. So there's like a little like shield mark that it
Yeah.
has, and it basically is trying to convince you that okay, like you can trust this product more than one that
Hmm.
doesn't choose to, have their product adhere to these standards. So I think these standards are also like not crazy. So I wouldn't say that they're a big like regulatory burden on
Right.
like anybody who's making these sorts of products anyway. So the fact that you're supposed to do most of this stuff anyway, and it's just that companies
Right.
cutting corners is really what has made this kind of standard like necessary. That's really what this is all about.
Yeah, I like that. This is nice. It's a good thing to see. This is what I want to see the U.S. government working on. Something good
Definitely,
for
just
all of
making it
us.
more clear for consumers,
Yeah.
like what is a good choice and what isn't a good choice when it comes to a cybersecurity like
Hmm.
related product. All right, so let's see. Oh yes, this is another great story. U.S. government
Yeah.
agency has banned European spyware vendors Intelexa and Cytrox. So one of these, I believe, is Greek, and the other is yes, Hungary.
Yep.
Then another from North Macedonia.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So never mind. Its company had multiple subsidiaries in different
Mm-hmm.
companies, and then this one did too. So these companies are mercenaries. Basically, they
Yep.
are the ones who are offering those big bounties we were talking about, and they're almost definitely, in some way, shape, or form, related to those Apple security updates we just talked
Yeah.
about earlier. So, because they are the biggest customer for those sorts of exploits, and then they can turn around and sell those to all sorts of unscrupulous people, you can see that the heads of like Meta were targeted by these people,
Hmm.
European heads of states, like dissidents, like journalists, like the exact kind of people you would expect
Right.
people with power and money would maybe want revenge on or want
Right.
to monitor or infect with a malicious program. So yeah, these sorts of mercenaries have become an increasingly big problem as they start hoarding these zero-day vulnerabilities and selling them to the highest bidder. So you can
Yeah.
expect to continue to see these businesses pop up in the news, and it really is whack-a-mole because one company gets shut down and the developers kind of move on to another. But it is an encouraging step to see that some of these that are starting to gain prominence and acceptance worldwide are being cut short, at least by this particular government agency.
Hmm.
All right, let's see. So this is another interesting story out of Ukraine. This one
Yeah.
talking about a massive propaganda farm. So they seized 150,000 SIM cards and 250 GSM gateways. And this was part of a scheme that basically was creating fictitious accounts and trying to spread like demoralizing propaganda
Yep.
domestically in
Hmm.
Ukraine. So these sorts of like propaganda bot like I guess you could call them like troll farms would operate within the
Yeah.
country, like set up infrastructure there and then make it so that you could just push misinformation to the general public. So these are sophisticated operations that are part of a propaganda pipeline that's information warfare. It's really designed to demoralize and
Yeah.
confuse civilian populations. So seeing these shut down and what one of these kind of like lightweight information warfare cells looks like
Right.
is a really interesting takedown. I actually haven't watched this video, and I feel like maybe I'll get an ad or something. Nope, no ads, just pure seizing. Okay,
It's
their
I,
cabling
yeah.
their cabling seems like it was done in an emergency. Wow, that's a lot of GSM gateways. So, obviously what they're doing here is they're connecting to different cell towers,
Hmm.
pretending to be, legitimate devices and sending out
Right.
propaganda, in as distributed a fashion as possible. This seems like also a pretty professional setup that's, like, pretty well funded.
Yeah.
So, yeah, being able to take down these, like, domestic propaganda farms is, like, a huge priority, and seeing what they actually look like is kind of shocking.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a peek behind the curtain there. It's pretty interesting to see that, and especially they put it online. That's really interesting. I've got nothing to say, but good.
All right, so next up we have Norway banning behavioral ads by Facebook,
Mhm.
which I really hate this by the way, but yeah, I think that this is in general a really good move because
Yeah.
behavioral based advertising is creepy and feels very
Hmm.
much like you should have some sort of consent.
Yep.
If you have like if you have the ability to have Facebook detect when you're sad or upset or like you've had a negative emotional
Hmm.
change and you're more vulnerable to buying something and selling that information to people who are eager to try to exploit you in that moment, that really feels like a breach of trust and like
Yeah.
a lack of concern for the ultimate customer. So in this case, like I am happy to see behavioral advertising getting a second look. I think it's like the worst use of data by Facebook, and it's one of
Hmm.
the ways that they really kind of go beyond what a user could control in their
Yeah.
experiences. If you can't control, the advertising taking advantage of you in a bad moment, like that to me is a, kind of a step over the line. So we see a lot of this forward-reaching data privacy law stuff, like in the European Union.
Hmm.
In Norway, it seems kind of new, but I'm interested to see how this plays out because behavioral advertising is like a-okay in most places. Even if I
Right.
don't like it, like it is legal to do in a lot of places. So seeing it being more directly addressed is something I'm actually pleased about because I think it's good for privacy, and
The
also for consumer choice.
the funny thing I saw in this too is, towards the end of the article, that what really stuck out for me is, so Norway did a temporary ban. I believe they're appealing this to the greater European Union, because Meta is already like out of compliance. They got fined massively for doing this type of stuff anyway. But the funniest part I thought of the story is Facebook or Meta
Hmm. I don't know if it's you or me, Killian, but you're coming in a little bit broken up. Um, I guess we'll find out in a second. Um, but we're also oh oh no. All right, I let's see. Let's see if I can bring Killian back. I'm sorry about that. It seems like we got almost all the way through the stream with only one major giant technical glitch. Let's see if if he can come back. If not, I also looks like Killian's back.
Oh,
Hello,
weird.
Killian. You don't seem like a robot anymore. Welcome back.
I was just about to message you because I saw everything stop moving, and I'm like, did I break?
Okay, it was just you for a moment, but
Okay.
it seems like we're all good again. So the last thing I was going to bring up, and just that's just because the story is interesting, is hackers
Hmm.
using AI. So we've talked about how like hackers haven't really gotten into using AI for attacks that much yet.
Hmm.
Like maybe for like some phishing stuff, but it seems like there are now two different things emerging that are indicating an extreme interest in using AI. One of them is just the breach of tons and tons of OpenAI credentials, which allows people to get into other people's accounts and use ChatGPT for whatever they want.
Hmm.
And then if somebody decides that they don't like that and they get the shutdown, then it doesn't really impact them. They just go on to the next account. Another is Worm GPT. So
Yeah.
this is an alternative to ChatGPT, which is supposed to be trained on malware. So it's trying to learn how to be evasive. It's trying to learn how to write programs that are malicious, do bad things, and are also, like remixes of other stuff that's out there. Which,
Hmm.
frankly, like a lot of stuff is just remixes of other stuff out there. So I have not seen I have not really seen, like, what exactly this looks like. I think that I don't trust code written by AI yet, like, so
Right.
I was like a black hat gang, like, I really wouldn't be too hyped about that. However, as this points out, it does show potential for a business email compromise
Hmm.
attack. So you get in, you give it a bunch of examples of what like executive communications look like, and with the right amount of training data, the right amount of like samples, I think you could potentially use this to do a business email compromise attack and actually be able to, potentially, like breach an organization and then use this as a way to keep the conversation going in the correct tone, trying to get to the goal of like
Hmm.
swapping out like a bank account routing information or something like that. So I do think that this is potentially a threat, at least on that front. But I don't think that I would be too worried about the kind of code that it can write
Yeah.
right now. James says he would trust code that AI wrote on my computer. Well, I'm sure, I'm sure you would, James.
Kody,
um,
just go ahead and plug in this USB drive. It's where you can compile the code for the
love
language
it.
model. It's fine.
Yes, I love it when my fans send me USB drives, please. So I think it might be about time for that tour if I can get this working.
Mhm.
Um, so Killian has also been to the North Carolina office and knows how fancy and nice it is. So let me see if I
Mhm.
can get this up. Okay. And give me just 1 second and I will take you guys on a quick tour. I'm actually going to turn off my headphones here. And then let's go walk around the office. Okay, Killian, say something if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Hopefully, you can hear me.
Oh no. Okay, well, I can't hear you, but you can hear me, and that's really what the most important thing is. Let me see if I can. Oh, okay. Do audio. Okay, well, we'll give it a try. So I'm gonna walk around, and this is the floor I was streaming on. Everything. So I worked at Uber for a little bit, and this is like just a friendlier like way of naming things. They had like very intense names for all their meeting rooms. These are all nice. They're all like little cities you can visit. All right, let's keep going. Got a little kitchen. This isn't the main kitchen. There's more kitchens, so don't even worry. All right, we have the main. This is like the main deal. So when we did our conference here last time, we all get to hang out on these swings over here,
Oh, there's the swing. I see it.
which I swung until I got very sick. We've got this cool graffiti art on the walls, which I love street art. I love graffiti. So this is one of my favorite things about this office. It's how cool it is. All right. Stairs down to this main kind of like conferencey area. People working on one another. And then like a chill out area where there's cartoons on. Nice.
Ooh.
We've got a bunch more offices back here, which are awesome. And then let's go down to the main space. So while visiting North Carolina, I wanted to come here so bad. So I'm glad they were able to put it together at the last minute. Everybody was super friendly here, and yeah. All right, going downstairs. So this is where we did our big meeting last year. And there it is. The other thing is the floors here are concrete, and for whatever reason, the treatment that keeps them clean makes my shoes incredibly loud. And someone here says that it makes me sound like SpongeBob, just like squeaking with absolutely every step. So yeah, I guess it started. But anyway, so that is our little mini office tour. They were so nice for letting me in today. I'm gonna run back up to the stream so I can hear Killian again. But I mean, I guess that's pretty much it for the stream today. So if you guys have any questions about the office, also remember that if you want to continue the conversation, you can always go to the Discord community we set up. It's at nugget.lol, nugget.lol. I just like that domain. I bought a bunch of .lol domains, and that's one of my favorites. And you can say hello. And also, if you want to support the stream and Veronis, you can go to veronis.com/Kody. That's Kody. And, they check to see how many people are going through that link to make sure that we are all paying attention and that people care about the stuff we talk about. So if you like the stream, if you want to support us, then all you got to do is go to veronis.com/Kody. And also, of course, check out our Discord. So I can see my computer. I'm almost there, but I'm also a little out of breath. This is a big office. It's huge. Just getting from one side to the other takes a while. Okay, let's switch back. There I am. All right, so that's all I have for today. Let me exit out of this. Cool. Killian, thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for hanging out with us on the stream. Yeah. Okay. So if you didn't see the kiosk, also, it was very cool. It was like a bunch of tech supplies that you would need, like working in an office like this, like everything from like a webcam to like other accessories. Super awesome. So being able to just go like tap your badge and then just get like an HDMI cable or like a webcam or something. Pretty nice, pretty cool. And I would say that also the kitchen here is really well stocked and very nice.
Yeah, really, really nice office. I mean, they did a great job with it. I always like visiting down there. Kind of wish if I had to go to an office, that's the one it would be like. But I am not in North Carolina.
I'm not really an office style person, but like
No.
as a base of operations when I'm traveling, I have to say this office is one of my favorite that I've ever been in. It's super friendly. The street art is just like really pretty and cool. And generally, like especially today, it's like so relaxed because a lot of people are working
Yeah,
from home, I think. But I guess it gets really busy earlier in the week.
it
So
does. Yeah.
they were very nice to let me come in and get to hang out and do the stream with everyone. So
Ooh.
barring the technical difficulties, I think this went pretty well. This is also the first time I've ever streamed from my camera, so I might try it out again soon. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. We will see
Yeah.
you next week where I will be in New York. I don't know if I'll be able to stream on Wednesday. We'll give it our best shot, but I will be live on Friday. So we'll see where I'll be, probably New York. But it's been fun, Killian. See you next time.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.